Welcome to the HReSource podcast, a series designed specifically for business owners and executives who want to better understand people to increase productivity and performance. Today we welcome back one of our earlier guests, Rachel Flower. If you might recall, Rachel spoke to us with some passion about the inspirational work behind being one of the co-founders of Excluded UK, the campaigning group that has made a real difference supporting those who've been discriminated against by not receiving funds or support during the pandemic. Today, we've got a different conversation with Rachel, and it's one that's equally as inspirational and really is so very positive. Rachel's got a background in law, contracts, and has worked and helped grow thousands of businesses of all shapes and sizes. She's an active advocate for equality and diversity, compassionate leadership, and championing businesses that do good in the world. At Active Orbit, which is what we're going to be talking about today, Rachel is a CEO and mostly found driving forward the community ethos, activity for all, engaging with members, partners, team, and stakeholders to deliver that vision. Changing how people get active, something I think we could all get some benefit from. I know I could. She's always got an eye on tackling bigger issues linked to inactivity such as mental health and chronic disease, particularly related to longevity and improving quality of life and relationships. In her limited spare time, she sings with the White Rosettes, a barbershop chorus, and loves nothing more than good food, good wine, shared with friends and family. Coming to a household near us soon, we all hope. I am delighted to welcome back to the HReSource podcast, and I mean welcome back, our very first returnee, that's Rachel Flower. Hi, Rachel.
Hey, David. Thanks for having me back.
Very great to see you. We had a fascinating conversation, which I know that you and I could have been going on and talking on for hours. I think it just about hit the hour mark. In the end, when we talked about all your wonderful work as one of the co-founders of Excluded UK. But that's not what we're going to talk about today, because we have, although your work there obviously continues and you're very supportive of that community, but there's one or two other things that you've been doing during this period of pandemic, one of which I understand has been to launch a new business or relaunch a new business. And that's something that I very much want to talk to you about. So perhaps you could give me a little bit of a flavour of what the last 12 months have been like for you from an entrepreneurial perspective.
Sure. Well, where would I start? I love the way you said one or two things have been happening in the last year. I mean, it's been an absolute roller coaster. And yes, I co-founded a new business, a tech for good business, in May 2020. So it was, in the wake of the pandemic. And I think the first thing I'd say is that was born out of this deep desire to make more of a contribution, which hit me like something I can't even really describe. I've been an entrepreneur running my own business for 10 years. I'm raising a young family. So that was part of why it worked for me, but I've never really given in to the whole, and now I want to create a legacy, and now I want to have a huge amount of impact, and now I want to transform, millions of lives. I have that seed within me, and I know that I have, and I think many of us do. But before the pandemic hit, I think it was just simmering, and I was running what you might call, a lifestyle business. It's fantastic, very successful, but wasn't really filling me up. And that's what hit me, I think, in the wake of the pandemic, and I'd started some work on the Excluded campaign, and I could see all these problems unfolding that I'd cared about and wanted to solve for a very long time, but hadn't known how. And so that's where it started, I think. And I can probably only pinpoint that now because I'm a little bit further on and I have this extremely ambitious vision. So it's started to collect the dots. Whereas when I first started it in May, it was really just about going into my networks and saying, who's doing what? I want to do something big. I want to make a difference in the world. Not in those words, but that was my mentality.
What was the spark for that? I mean, there are a lot of problems with the world right now, not least of which obviously a pandemic, which is being handled as we speak. But what was the spark for you? What was the focus?
Yeah, so perhaps it makes sense for me to explain, first of all, what it is that we've built and we've created. So it's Active Orbit is what we've called it. And it's essentially a platform, a community platform, bringing people together to help them get more active. So to help them to move more every single day, walking in the first instance, but also running or cycling, is recorded on an app. And then that rewards the user in their local community. So it means that they can get these Orbit points and then go shopping in your locality and get discounts or money off down at your local cafe or on your little high street. So hopefully you can see from the way I've described it, it's about tackling physical inactivity, which is a huge problem around how healthy we are, but it's also about supporting local businesses and giving them a leg up in a country, but also globally, where it's becoming increasingly difficult to succeed as a small business. Sitting behind that is also the concept of social connectedness. And the fact that I fear that communities that we live in are just becoming increasingly disconnected, and that we aren't taking care of one another, that people are lonely, that people don't know their neighbours, that we're all getting addicted to technology. So I'm kind of listing through, I guess, 8 or 10 very quite complex social economic problems. Yeah. And Active Orbit really came about from wanting to solve some of those problems and really tackle them head on.
So one of the statistics, of which there's a myriad in relation to health and fitness, but there was an NHS report. As I know, Rachel, I like to do my research before I have a guest of your stature on, and well, as all the guests have been high-profile individuals. But the NHS provided a report in May, and it's quite staggering that something like 60% of us are overweight. And if I'm being perfectly honest, that's me. I might be on the lower end of the scale, but we could all do with being a little bit more active. And surely that was a figure that was collated for the year 2018-19. Sort of move forward a little bit, we've got a pandemic. How many of us have been eating, drinking, sitting on the sofa, binging on Netflix, and not necessarily being as active as we really could, should, need to be? I think that problem is I don't know whether we've got any more data that's out now, if you know of any more statistics, but I think there's a huge problem. That's just the UK, and I know that it's replicated in other parts of the world, and certainly the States. But we've got a big problem with our health, fitness, and our accumulation of weight.
Yeah, I mean, weight is a great stat to start with because it's intrinsically linked to physical inactivity in of itself. The reason that most people become overweight and or obese is because they're not moving enough in the everyday. Children as well, so very frightening stats around how many of our children are overweight, and all of those stats are then linked to the impact that has on your physical health. So really closely linked to a huge uptick in the last few decades in chronic diseases. Almost everything actually can scientifically be linked back to inactivity, whether it's diabetes, whether it's your mental health and the impact there, or indeed cancer is now proven to be intrinsically linked to inactivity. So what we're also talking about, where we're encouraging people to get more active, is really a cultural change. Because when we look at why that is, it's because we've moved away from the type of lives that you could argue we were put on this earth to live. So when we first evolved, or as cave people, we were active nearly all of the time, but we were also only eating what we gathered. And, we were sleeping better because we were living almost guided by nature. Yeah. So the intrinsic problems linked to what you're seeing statistically is really to do with the way society is now structured. And in particular, although it's hard to point a finger at just one area, but in particular, the rise of capitalism, so many people working in offices, sitting at their desk, they're sedentary, they're getting very stressed, they're sat in front of screens. Our children are in front of iPads or Xboxes, and we are not embracing nature in the way that we would have done previously. I remember, my own childhood, and my mum would walk everywhere. She didn't drive. She didn't even own a car. And we walked to school, and, everything,
Yeah.
even that, and that's not so long ago. I'm not so old, but now everybody just jumps in their car for short journeys, or it's that natural inclination, I think, is to talk about fitness and exercise as something that is almost like punishing, rather than thinking about activity just being within the fabric of your everyday life. So that's the change that we need to see, and that's the change that Active Orbit is trying to sit in the middle of. So we purposefully have designed the system, for example, where we're just focusing on walking in the first instance, brisk walking, but that's very much scientifically proven to be one of the best forms of activity that you can do, and it's free.
I've revisited the old constitutional. I will have an evening constitutional walk. I will just get out there and go for it. We've got a Yorkshire Terrier, not the most robust of creatures ordinarily. They're quite wiry, but I say robust because, bless her, she's 15, but she's been my pal through lockdowns, because she's been there as a sort of a go-to, something to go out for a walk with. I feel a bit self-conscious initially, just sort of going out for a walk. Now I don't care. The constitutional for me, I'll listen to a podcast. I might listen to the HReSource podcast. I was really narcissistic about it. But there's plenty of really good content you can listen to. You can keep yourself informed. You can learn new languages, or you can learn new skills and keep yourself fit at the same time. And I think a walk, which might sound boring to some people, actually doesn't have to be at all. And we should be doing more of it. Spot on.
Yeah, I think even as you describe it, there's a number of the problems that are endemic in society that have come through in what you just said. So, for example, you talked about, people associate walking with being bored. They need a reason to do it. You need a dog, otherwise you feel self-conscious walking on your own, or it's a waste of time. Like, there's always something else that we could be doing. These are exactly the social norms that have become social norms that we need to really challenge and really go in hard of. And this is why, interesting to speak in the context then of HR and how businesses can make these things acceptable again. A lot of what we talk about Active Orbit as well is about, you might notice right here now I'm at a standing desk. I barely sit down anymore at my desk. I've got an elevated desk and I'm on my feet all of the time, and encourage the team to do the same. Have walking meetings. If you don't need to actually be looking at each other when you have a meeting, get on your headphones and have your meeting while you're out walking.
Yeah.
Obviously socially distanced, we can do that in person as a workforce at the moment. And these are all things that we need to make culturally acceptable. And the other reason that's really super interesting, I think, is because it's proven by brain science that you're more creative when you're moving like that. It helps your right and your left side of the brain to talk to each other better. So you can balance your creativity with your logic and problem solve. Obviously, being out in nature is just incredibly good for your mental health. So there's all these other reasons, as if we needed them, but unfortunately we do need them because society has moved away from it. And also what you described there, which our solution is really based upon, is behavioural change, which is the thing that really, really interests me. So we've purposefully designed it so it's just tiny steps at a time. The person chooses, they take control, and they layer it on something else. So you, for example, said you're constitutional, you're doing it in the evenings after dinner, and that's working for you, and that's great, and that's what we're looking for. We're looking for an anchor that people pop this new habit on, and then they get going. Just 10 minutes every day. We're saying you can do 10 minutes. We're not asking you to go to the gym 3 times a week for an hour at a time. Just 10 minutes. Can you do that? And then from there, that sense of empowerment, that sense of feeling more in control, that's how we start to see behavioural change take a grip.
You can almost immediately feel benefits, and what you're talking about with mental health, or way of thinking, being more creative. I'm quite through the working day, and I'm working from home obviously at the moment, but you come across a problem, a challenge that needed a solution, and I could have been staring at a screen, trying to find all sorts, Googling the hell out of the issue, trying to find a way through it. And then I put away all the technology and get out there for an evening walk. And in the cold, sort of fresh air that you're inhaling, and as you're sort of walking along, your brain starts to work in a slightly different way, and you can start to process the difficulty or the challenge and find a way. And the number of times, and I'm certainly not a genius, but the number of times you'd come back from a walk and I would have that answer. And that is, I think, true of most of us. I mean, there was a lot of notional talk about Steve Jobs used to do a lot of his meetings on the hoof as well. He was very much a creative leader and an entrepreneur, and he always found a way to solve his problems with colleagues was to go out and go for a walk with them and have a chat and talk it through, and it works. Absolutely right.
That's the top-down culture that we're talking about, though, isn't it? So that's great, Steve Jobs doing that and setting it. Unless you have a culture within your organization, it's very difficult for people in middle management or below to be saying, I'm going to go for a walk. I mean, it's often judged in corporate life now to even take a lunch break. You know, we see everybody like wolfing down their sandwiches at their desk or coming in early and getting a head start on their work. And if somebody's left the office and they leave their jacket on the chair to make sure I'm still here. It's all of that culture we need to break, because from a productivity point of view, absolutely scientifically proven that if you encourage people to be taking those breaks, even short ones, then actually they come back more refreshed, they get their work done faster. Now that's even on a day-to-day basis. What we're talking about here is habitual change over time, and then the benefits can be absolutely massive. So if you imagine the increased productivity just on one day, but if you actually build that out over 3 to 6 month period, suddenly then you've got a workforce that is more engaged, they're more creative, they're feeling more enthusiastic, they're engaging with their customers in a more passionate, interested way. That is the benefit of what literally, I say activity, not exercise, because it's not about giving them a gym pass and telling them to get on the treadmill. It's about the empowerment of taking those small steps, being outdoors, but also feeling socially connected is what the Active Orbit solution is provided, because they're going out for a reason. They're going out and they've got a reward to claim, as they buy their lunch, or the dopamine hits that says, I've done good because I've also, I'm going to give my reward to charity and I'm going to help other people in the process. So it becomes a circular incentive that they just want to do more of, feel good about themselves.
And have you seen any, I think I might know the answer is going to be to this, but for you personally, being more active, the standing desk and all the other activities and the walking that I know you do, and the beautiful Yorkshire moors that you live in, what have you seen by way of change in your own life and in your own outlook?
Well, it's really difficult, isn't it? Because it's like we have to remember that as yet, at the time of speaking to you, we're still in the middle of this horrendous traumatic event, let's face it. So, being locked down still, I've got 2 young children who are at home. I guess the best I could say is I dread to think what state I would have been in if I hadn't had Active Orbit to focus on. But I mean, it brings me back to the question you asked me earlier about, what made me found it, and I so I've explained what it is that the business does and the impact that we want to have in the world in terms of helping people live longer, healthier, happier lives. I'm connecting the dots, but I can only do that now. But I lost my parents when they were both 51. They died within 6 months of each other. My dad died of a heart attack. My mum died of cancer that had spread to her liver, and I was only 20 at the time. So I was young when I lost my parents. So I've lived through my 20s and my 30s, tried to take care of my health the best as I can, but I suppose I didn't realise what this thing deep inside me was. And it's only really come out as I've got further along the Active Orbit journey. And it was quite recent, about a month ago, when I was presenting to a whole panel of people. We're looking for private equity. And one of them said to me, well, why? Why are you doing this? Yeah. And as intuition often does, I said, because I don't want, getting emotional now, I don't want people to go through what I went through. I don't want people to lose their parents at a young age. I don't want people to be dying in their 50s because they weren't educated. And my dad lived a very sedentary life. He was a sales rep. He was on the road a lot. He didn't eat very well. He also had a lot of stress, so this is where our why comes in, doesn't it? We don't always necessarily know what it is at the time. It only comes out later. And that is my mission now, is I want to transform the way that we live in society so that, I mean, you're probably familiar with blue zones, and we can come and talk about those, but there are places in the world where people live into their 90s and beyond, and they have kind of renounced material things. They've turned away from having fast cars or status systems of households. They are full of love of life, and there's quite simple things that we can do to make that happen. But who doesn't want to live a longer life? Who doesn't want to be there to see their grandchildren? Who doesn't want to know that they can proactively regenerate the cells in their body to be healthier? We all do, but human behavior in the society we live in means we make bad decisions every single day.
Yeah, and it's longer, healthier life, because my father lived until his 80s, and it's tragic to hear your story of your parents. But I wouldn't say he was a particularly healthy man. He got diabetes. He also got dementia, and lived with those conditions for quite a period of time. And so quality of life, really, and he interestingly had a sales-related job as well, quite sedentary. He used to smoke. He wasn't a drinker, but he had, and he liked his pies, and he liked his donuts, and he liked his cakes. He was quite a large guy. And you think at that time, they didn't really have the knowledge. They didn't have the science or the support, which we have now. But unfortunately, we're in a situation where we talk about the pandemic in viral terms of COVID, but there's this pandemic in terms of the way people are getting overweight and unfit, because we're just going with it, going with the flow, rather than making a conscious decision to put our lives in order. And I think there was another statistic, and I think employers need to take this on board in terms of running a healthy business, for more ways than one, but a healthy business for their staff and for a better outlook. I think it was something like 876,000 admissions to hospital in 2018-19, but one of the core causes of that condition that they were admitted to hospital for was being overweight. 876,000. I mean, that's a stunning number.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not familiar with that exact stat, but I know that the cost estimated is 9 billion per year in terms of conditions or health outcomes, and actually the physical inactivity and obesity it rivals cancer as a cause of early morbidity. Yeah. So all the science is there, but yet as humans, we need to, knowing that it might affect the longevity of your life isn't enough to make us stop. And the reason for that is that we're fundamentally unhappy. And that's only going to get worse in the short term. People are already extremely unhappy in this lockdown. And that is, again, this came out, it wasn't my founding intention. It came out later as we were driving into like your bag of tricks, the marketing and our brand, if you like, and what's inside of me and how I want this to be in the world. But it really is about happiness. And that sounds really cheesy, but when we move more and we feel better in ourselves, then we're happy. We have better relationships with our loved ones and our family. When we feel healthier, then we, mentally feel stronger. We go after the jobs we want, or we're happier in our jobs. And as we've mentioned, we're more productive in the workplace. So, I mean, happiness is transient, obviously. It isn't about being, happy every minute of the day, but it's about health is wealth. And we've all experienced, and COVID has brought that into really, under the lens. If you don't have that, then it's very difficult to be happy. It's not impossible, but it really hinders how happy you can be. And I think, so much fear around at the moment. Many pandemics, I think, are going on, including the pandemic of loneliness. And that's at the heart of Active Orbit as well. It's at the heart of saying, get out into your community, speak to people. If you're on a walk, you tend to, I don't know if you've noticed it, but you're smiling and you're saying hello, you're saying good morning.
We live in the north of England. We're very friendly up in the north of England. That's just part
we are. When you go, I've certainly experienced when I take my northern self down to London and I start smiling at people on the tube, they look at you as if you're deranged.
Yeah,
so
must be eye contact and smiling.
But don't you feel so much better?
Yes.
Well, I mean, I've had moments during lockdown when I've gone out on my run or my walk, and the smile I get from somebody actually makes my heart physically explode. Like, I'm so, because I've been starved of social contact during this time, and I know that I crave it, and I desperately want to be back in a room with my friends and my family and having hugs and sharing a nice meal. And it's like that smile just, I find it almost painful in its application, and I think that's part of what we've got to cut through here, is we get communities moving together. And Parkrun's a great example, of course, of a community that started moving together, and it's staffed almost entirely by volunteers, which shows you how powerful it is when people come together and they just enjoy that simple pleasure of being in a green space and moving. And it's not, I mean, there is a competitive element to parkrun, of course. You can compete against others and against yourself, but also it's also completely acceptable to just walk with your child and take it at your own pace.
It's a great example, that, Rachel, of it's more about the event. It's not the what in terms of the physical activity you're undertaking. It becomes about the event, and just perchance you happen to be doing something which is actually going to give you a benefit in physical terms, but mostly in mental as well, because you're mixing and you're seeing familiar faces, and it's that brings us back to you were talking about our earlier stages of development as humans. Very much a communal spirit that we're all connected to. We're not meant to live on our own. We're not meant to be hermits. We're not meant to be just looking at screens all day. We're very much evolved fairly recently out of a very sort of much more open and natural lifestyle. This is very unnatural for us. We're looking at light that is unnatural. And in terms of the way that we sit, we sleep quite often, it's unnatural. So to do something which is more physical has got to be factor in some part of your day to be able to get some benefit.
But in the first instance, to make it easy for yourself, and this is where we come back to, we're using hashtag everyday10 at the moment, with this concept of like, we're too far away from it at the moment to expect that everybody's just suddenly going to start moving around their community for 2 hours every day. We have to take it one step at a time. So, our route to market is B2B, is getting the employers to take responsibility and putting this in place as a workplace wellbeing initiative, and so much fun that they can have with that, because then you can add that little bit of kind of team spirit to it, that they can support one another, but equally it's about access for all. So recognizing that, you may have your classic Strava users who start competing and want to really go for welly for it, but it's then completely acceptable for somebody who is currently sedentary to just go with their start point, which is this: I'm just going to do 10 minutes every day, and I'm not going to put pressure on myself. And we've even put quite a lot into our, the way that we talk to people in that first instance. Is step one is just lace up your trainers and get over the front door. That's a big step for people, particularly those who might have been shielded through this time, or are feeling nervous, or have just become depressed. The mental health implications of what we've all been through are absolutely massive. And I love the quote from the chief medical officers, that if activity was a prescription, it would be a wonder drug. That's what they say. If they could prescribe it and hang it out, then they would. Now, of course, we say with Active Orbit, well, that's exactly what they can do. We're talking to the NHS about social prescribing. Absolutely, because you're then adding in incentivizing and rewards, which is another classic behavioral change. So, but I'm sure you can tell from the way I'm describing to you, this is cultural change as well. It needs to be really recognized that it's okay to take away this workaholic stature that we seem to have put on everybody, where you work as many hours as you can and you stay at your computer as long as you can, and you get like a badge of honor for being on Zoom calls as much as you can at the moment. That needs to go, and it needs to start from the top down.
Yeah, because it really is not productive to behave in a manic way of overwork. Ultimately there's the route that's going to lead to is a burnout, and nobody wants to be able to see that. So to we bring to the point of sort of grassroots of Active Orbit and somebody who wants to do something feel that they know or needs to do something, but can't quite get to that point of starting? What's the motivating factor? How can Active Orbit help them? How can they be motivated?
Well, I think this is why we've designed it to go community to community. So we are rolling it out on a regional approach where we have a sort of a graphic, because graphics always help, but it shows that everybody's got a vested interest in making this happen. The employers, because they want to care about their team, what we call the reward partners, so the local businesses that get involved and say, yeah, we want to reward people for being active. Obviously the national and local policymakers, who this is absolutely what they say they want to do. They want to improve health outcomes and move towards active travel and green sustainable living. And then the individuals themselves who, as I say, yes, they want to get more active and healthy, but if you really listen to them, they just want to be happier. We all just want to be happier. So what it actually takes is a community effort, because all of those people with a vested interest have to get involved and sort of start to, what we say, spin the wheel and move together. And that is where we've carefully designed this solution, because what we see in the market otherwise is a fragmented approach. You know, somebody in the individual camp is trying to go to the gym on their own and it's lonely and they give up. You know, obviously we have small businesses trying desperately to attract footfall and their marketing isn't working, you know, so we say this is a great portal for you. Employers might be trying things, but they're not working and struggling to know how to get like a one size fits all, because some initiatives that they use work for some and not for others. And again, I can't labour the point enough really, but the local and the national policymakers are absolutely key to this. They're not currently put the funding towards things like this. They're paying for infrastructure to go down. They're building cycling paths, completely missing the point that how are you going to get people out on the paths? It's great that you've built them, but people need to be incentivized into habits of using them. That's right. So really what I'm talking to you about now is the fact that when we launch in a region, we bring a whole load of stakeholders together and we ask them to get behind it. And we, you know, might talk about the things that we've talked about today in terms of health outcomes, but what I'm more likely to talk to them about is, you know, imagine a world where, you know, your neighbours smile at each other every day, and imagine a world where, you know, your children are growing up healthy and we're reducing you know, their chances of getting diseases too early in life. But you have to paint a picture. You have to really, I think, talk to the human side of this, because the decision makers, you know, they are still humans. And I think we forget that from a kind of a sales perspective, don't we? We start talking stats like you and I have done today. But the bottom line, and a bit like the climate change conversation is, you know, do you want to live a long life and see your grandchildren grow up? Then if so, we've all got to come together and do things differently. It's broken.
Yeah.
You know, our systems are broken.
Just go on the Constitution and look around you and look at other individuals without being overly critical about body shapes or whatever. But you can see that we are becoming embroiled in this sort of lifestyle and world where we're not actually the best that we can possibly be of ourselves. And without trying to be overly vain about your appearance, but actually thinking more about what impact you can have on the world around you, you're going to be far more capable of doing something positive if you feel yourself positive. So if it's going all right inside your head, but also physically, you're able to keep up with things. And so with the stakeholders that you're talking about, the regional rollout, that's a fascinating approach, because obviously there's a lot of other solutions out there, which I'm not going to name check, but are on a national or international level, some brands that we're familiar with. But a local level sort of speaks very strongly about the community. What about the local businesses, the business partners involved in this? What typically might they do in terms of support?
Well, I think they're in a great position. I mean, it's been an extremely challenging year for so many small businesses. And as you know, through my passion for the Excluded UK, you know, we've unfortunately seen lots of small businesses close already. The time is now. We've got to take urgent action to help these small businesses to get properly back on their feet. So, you know, this, for me, this solution has got that as one of the cornerstones. And that is about, when I say the timing is great for me, is because people have recognised in the pandemic that they want to shop locally, that they don't want, you know, I mean, Amazon's the classic one, but we've all seen how much they have taken a grip of the market. I'm on an anti-Amazon mission at the moment. It's quite hard. It's like an addiction, because I can order off Amazon and sometimes it's here the same day or tomorrow. And that's great. But I have to really catch myself and go, do I really need that delivery tomorrow? Am I better to, support my local business, maybe wait 2 or 3 days for it, or, what can I wait so that those shops don't disappear off my local high street? And those are decisions that we all have to make as individuals. But I do think in the wake of pandemic, people are thinking like that. The phrase out there at the moment, particularly if you speak to people in retail or working in property, is doorstep living. So people are expected in the next 1 to 2 years to really focus on supporting their local communities. And for a small business owner, that means that you get your chance to be that citizen of your community as well, to have transactions that feel meaningful, that, you have a smile on your face when a customer comes through the door and you have a meaningful exchange. Yeah. And that's stuff that I think we're all really looking forward to getting back to. It's the feel good factor, and we're going to be so grateful for it because we've had time without it.
It's the phrase, I'm old enough to remember some of these old TV programs, but remember Cheers? And and the old cry that used to go up for Norm when he came to the bar. And it's that that level of community being recognised. Yeah, knowing absolutely. The person you're going in to see from the shop and the shopkeeper recognising you, and I think that's something that we've lost, and we desperately need to get it back.
But we have to decide that's what we're going to do. And, the larger employers and the larger corporates have a role to play in that, of course, which is, conversations we've had with large corporates where we're saying, bring your people on this platform. It's the right thing to do from a health perspective, but also it's like a CSR initiative, so they can support their local communities at the same time. It's the right thing to do, and we should all be trying to do the right thing at the moment. And we've lived through this really traumatic event, and I just think so many of us are craving not to go back to how life was before and to live a better world. They felt like their world's gone into black and white and they want to emerge into colour again. Well, I say to them, it's in your gift to do that, but we all have to decide. We all have choices to make every single day about how we live our lives.
Rachel, I'm sold, right? I'm absolutely sold. I'm in. I'm completely in. I was probably already in before we started the conversation, but I'm even more in now if that's possible. What does Active Orbit look like? Just explain to the listeners what is it that they can see? How the technology, the manifestation?
I mean, we've gone really quite deep today under the covers of me explaining to you where the idea came from, the why in me personally, and also the very important social economic problems that it aims to solve. But you can kind of erase that from your mind, because all the best technology and innovation, of course, is just simple. And that's how we've designed it. So it's almost like tricking people as well. You can be deceived by the simplicity of this tool that we're going to give you. They don't need to know the science about how it's going to change their behaviors, because we've designed it that way, and how it's going to make them happier because they're going to be suddenly explored. That is by the by. Really, it's just download the app. It's a very simple, beautifully designed, simple interface. Again, that's technology. We've learned that you don't want to have too much complexity in an app. People get overwhelmed.
Yes.
So all it does is record how many minutes you're walking every single day, and heart minutes are stored differently. So the faster that you're going, once you go brisk walking and beyond, it registers those as little heart minutes, and you get unlimited rewards for your heart minutes, but you get rewards for 30 minutes of your movements every day. So what we're saying in that example is, if you're just sauntering around your local environment, that's great, thumbs up, like it's good for your mental health, not really helping your cardio, so you can't have masses of rewards for that, but well done anyway, because you did what was right for you. But as soon as you start every single day pushing yourself a bit more, reminding yourself to walk a little bit faster, you'll get all the heart minutes stacked up, and there'll be unlimited rewards. So every 100 minutes, you get an Orbit reward just stored there in the app, and you can search through a bit like a TripAdvisor type search functionality, and just see what's going on in your local community and who you want to spend them with. And then you walk in, and it's a contactless redemption process. very quick. And, you know, obviously a big part of what we want to do is work with that reward partner community as well, so that that transaction is genuinely a lovely experience. You know, it's free for reward partners to come onto the portal and offer their rewards, but very much values aligned. So we talk to them about, come and do this because you want to help your community. Come and do this because you want to be part of your community. So yeah, and I guess, you know, the key is, in terms of what you're saying is, and we're intrigued, and we'll find this out during the test and launch stage, but what we're expecting is that little bit of addiction kicking in for people, that, like, you know, ooh, yeah, oh, it's really exciting this, and look, can I do more minutes than last week, and look, there's a new reward that's come on, and communities can start to do little challenges and events together. And, you know, we've had some lovely conversations with the regions, for example, where they can pool their rewards together, and that can be you know, a fiscal charity type event. So, you know, there's endless potentiality from where it can go, but it's going to be driven by the users in the community, and we've built the platform with that in mind, so that gamification features, if you like, can be added over time, but it will be driven by what the people say they want to see.
And if I'm talking from a business perspective now, as somebody that loves the idea, local business, local community, wants to be able to partner or find a way to work with Active Orbit to be able to promote what they do for the benefit of people who are working towards their reward goals, how might they get in touch with you? So should they get in touch with you?
Are you talking now about, like, businesses and companies who want to buy these subscriptions for their workforce?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we'd love to have conversations. As I say, we're rolling out region by region at the moment, so it depends on where that company is based currently. But equally, we want champions. We're doing some really small regional launches where there's only, you know, maybe 500 people coming in that region, and only a handful of reward partners, because it's not about size and scale at this stage. It's around people making it their own and making it work for them. For example, we have some employers who are adding their bespoke rewards, such as half days off or days off when you hit this level of goal, or, you know, things that are personal to their business and how they want to reward people. So I think it's really also about those people who are the decision makers and might buy those subscriptions. They're also, you know, the families that live in that region. So it's asking the question of themselves, how could I make this work? How could I be a champion in the region? And how would I like to see my community start to work? So an HR manager I was talking about the other day, she wants to take it to the schools, because she's got 2 primary school children. And yeah, absolutely great. Of course, you know, we can get a whole load of mums and dads on the school run collecting their points, and they're going to link it to getting technology for the schools. So it's really about people starting to own these tools and use them for the purpose that works for them and their communities.
So it's effectively, it's a platform. You're providing the technology, you're providing the mechanisms, and you're also providing, in to a certain extent, the relationships with some of these local businesses that can offer rewards, but it's down to the community themselves to shape it in a way that's going to work for them.
That's right. And this is actually a really important point, because we've been talking to a lot of the established such as Sport England and Active Partnerships, Sport and Recreation Alliance. A lot of good work going on in this area, of course, for years and years. It's not like it's a new problem. It's been exacerbated by COVID, but they're always looking for innovative technology tools like the one we've created. But the way of thinking now is about that local empowerment. It's about, let's stop with these top-down solutions. Let's stop pretending that one size fits all. The way that things ever happen, and the only way that change ever happens, is when the people get behind it, when there's people power, when they own it and they feel like they're co-creating it. And that's what I want for this. You know, I'm perhaps not the classic business person. You know, I'm not trying to create a monopoly. I'm not trying to create a great big money-making machine. I'm wanting to empower communities to make this change themselves. And I think and believe that's where the best technology tools need to be.
Exactly. And that's where the enterprise and the entrepreneurial spirit needs to be as well.
Yeah, and we've got work to do on that, haven't we? Of course. But, you know, the more I think business owners are thinking like that and working like that, and dare I say, you know, the more HR managers and directors who are thinking like that, who are trying really to take the tools that are right for them and their organizations and adapt them, rather than just trying to kind of tick a box. You know, I mean, we've talked about this previously, but, you know, many HR people might say, oh God, I've got to do something for well-being in the workplace. What shall I do? I'll buy this because that's something that they're using over there. And it may or may not be relevant.
Yeah. I mean, it's for me, one of the solutions of many, but one that actually speaks very clearly of a community. And it's something that if I'm running a business with a number of staff who are in need of that extra support, it makes my life actually somewhat easier, because I know that it's something that's going to be down. It's going to give them freedom of choice, and it isn't going to constrain them to knowing that they're going to have to be not that you can be a black belt in Pilates, but you know what I mean. They've got to be particularly skilled or energetic or have particular physical attributes to be able to undertake a skill, to do the X number of steps, to beat the challenge, to be the winner. We always get the competitive ones that want to be the very best at it. But it's beyond that. It's just about doing something very simple to make a start and build your own journey, and then do that collectively as a community. I just love the idea. Really do.
And celebrate as well, you know, the small things. And this, again, as I've mentioned, is the behavioural change that fascinates me, and I know it does you too. We did a lot of work with some eminent professors in behavioural change to check that we'd put enough of this critical thinking in for this launch phase. And yes, we know there are lots of wonderful things we can add on later, but when we go to market, we want to make sure at the very least that we are doing the bare minimum that is going to move these people onto a better platform of activity for their own health. So they worked with us to check that we'd kind of ticked off what we know about behavioural change and the way that it works. And I found that so fascinating, because it goes back to make it easy, make it individual and personalized, you know, so let them decide. They set their own targets in the app. It's up to you what you decide to do, and then really celebrate that every single time you achieve it, like it's the best thing that you've ever done. Because without that, historically, you know, the way that we talk about exercise and fitness is then otherwise it becomes a failure, doesn't it? It's like the New Year's resolutions that we make, and by the third week in January, we're kicking ourselves and saying that we're useless. So make it easy, make it, you know, personal to you, celebrate it, and then from there, we talked about layering it on to other activities that you're already doing. And I think there's some beautiful things that we're planning, you know, things like walk and talks, things like we'll be talking about like having a ping list. So have like 3 or 5 friends that, you know, you've all agreed that when you're going out for a walk, you'll ping each other to see who else is free, and get on a little call as you walk. You know, they're very simple things, but they're just so much about social connectedness. And that's what makes the difference. That's what makes the behavioural change, when it becomes more fun and effortless.
There's been a huge success, or what appears to be an apparent success, out of a new social media platform, which I know we're both on, called Clubhouse, which I mean, I'm still finding my way with it. I'm still feel very sort of, you know, just, is that going to work? But what that, if nothing else, what that says to me, the popularity and the interest in that is grown out of people who want to have a conversation about a common area, a common interest. And the thing about exercise and being active is that brings a very simple but common interest to an awful lot of people. And how you do that, there's a myriad of ways in which you can get that exercise, that activity. And by bringing people together, I think it just makes it that much easier for people to keep that benefit going, so they get to see some long-term return.
It becomes self-perpetuating, which is what you've experienced yourself, and you've, you know, beautifully described it. Once you've created that habit, after say 7 to 10 days, you do feel good, and it becomes something that you miss if you don't do it. But no matter how many times people tell you that, unless you've experienced it yourself, you don't believe it, do you? So this is where, again, technology and behavioral design comes into its own. These, you know, rewards that we're putting into the system and making them local rewards. So it's not really about your own health in your own mind. Then you're doing it because you're helping others. You're going out, you're supporting your local shop or your local school, or, you know, a charity that you care about. And before you know it, oh, I feel better. I walked further today than I have done before. And, you know, I feel brighter in myself. And, you know, you asked for how it's helped me feel better. And it certainly has. But, you know, my favorite story is my father-in-law, who, when I set up the business, and he's, you know, one of my biggest fans, and he was like, right, if that's what you're doing, I want to be part of that. And he's got COPD and he's got rheumatoid arthritis. So he's been shielded all this time. So he bought an exercise bike in September, and to support me as I'm preparing Active Orbit, he's been on this exercise bike in his garden shed at least 4 times a week. In that time, he's lost 2 stone in weight.
Wow.
His breathing, his chest has improved dramatically. He takes his vitals daily because of having these conditions, and his oxygen levels in his blood have risen significantly. His blood pressure's gone down. So, I mean, obviously I'm not telling you something that we don't already know, but it's been really beautiful and emotional for me to see already I've impacted the longevity probably of my father-in-law's life. And I'm really excited about, you know, putting that out into the world and transforming millions of people's lives. That blows my mind. And that brings us back to where we started this conversation. You know, that's what I felt in the wake of the pandemic, was a desire to have more of a contribution, to have more impact, and to leave something behind when I go. And hopefully for this, I'll be gifting myself and my children. I want to live a longer life as well, because I know the pain of losing my own parents young.
And that's a powerful message, but one that obviously from your point of view, you now identified as being one of the key drivers to doing what you're doing and making it. Rachel,
and those lived experiences, aren't they? You know, and I think everybody and people listening to this, I think it's good to then think and reflect and say, you know, what is the change I would like to see in the world? What is it that I really care about? Because so often we get, I mean, I was disconnected from that. I lost my parents 20 years ago. It's taken me 20 years to really, you know, and a pandemic for me to go, no, I'm going for it. You know, I'm throwing everything at it. So, you know, the time is not always right for people. You know, the time is right when it's right, is what I'm saying. But everybody has that thing deep inside of them that they know is the difference they want to make in the world. And when it comes, and you've just got to grab it and get on with it. And
you just send it into orbit, literally.
And active into orbit, yeah.
Rachel, on that terrible pun. It's fantastic again to talk to you and to hear your passion yet again, which I love, but channeled in such a way that is going to ultimately, I think, see a very successful series of soft launches, which will lead to a much bigger story, I'm sure. I'm sure now the listeners are very keen to hear how they can connect with you, how they can find out more about Active Orbit.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's activeorbit.co.uk is the website. I would leave on the note, you know, which is another passion of mine, you know, but I'm a mother, and what I see I'm doing here as a business person is kind of birthing something into the world, and I want to help it to toddle and run. So if people are listening and they love the idea of taking on this little baby and making it their own in their workplaces or their communities that they live in, and those are the sort of people I want to speak to. You know, those people that have been moved, I guess, by the conversation we've had today around wanting to live healthier, happier, longer lives, and gift other people to do the same. Because you know, like Dr. Seuss wrote in the book The Lorax, you know, unless people like us care a heck of a lot, nothing will change. So those are the people I want to talk to, people that really care about the things we've discussed about today. And frankly, you know, that's business, isn't it? I'm getting very good in my old age at saying, if people don't care, then that conversation's over. You know, next. Spend too much time in my life trying to convince people to see my view of the world, and if they don't, they don't.
I think an awful lot of people have taken time through the pandemic to do a number of different things, have, as you say, they might have written a list of things they wanted to try and achieve, some of which they may have already achieved, some of which they may not have achieved. But ultimately, they've had a time for reflection. And I think now is a fantastic time for having something of this nature that can harness some of those goals or achievements, because it will assist them to achieve what it was that they had in mind to do anyway. Because to be healthy, to be fit, to be sharp of mind is how they're going to achieve what they want to achieve, or make the best of what they want to try and achieve. So this is the right time, the right place, the right initiative as far as I'm concerned. And more power to you. Rachel, it's been fantastic. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.